Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining here this afternoon. I want to welcome you and introduce Michelle Sank to you guys. But first, I want to show you all this photo behind me. Um, this is the team of the Zuid-Afrikahuis, uh, and we are taking down a very valuable painting of Paul Kruger of the Wall. You guys have heard of him, I assume. He was a former president of the South African Republic. And for years, this painting has been in the meeting room of the Zuid-Afrikahuis, so right here upstairs, up until last Monday. And since Kruger is inherently connected to the Dutch colonial past, his memory is nowadays contested. But nevertheless, he was hanging here in the conference room. So altogether, we took down this photo of the wall to make space for Ballade, the photo exhibition of Michelle Sank, and the reason why we are all gathered here today. So not only did we create the physical space for the picture that will hang there, that you will guys all see in an hour or so, but it was also a symbolic act as well. We took down a painting from the past of South Africa to make space for the present day. And that is what we do, what we aim to do here in the Zuid-Afrikahuis. As an archive and a library, we want to show people the diversity of this beautiful country with attention to its past, but don't forget the present and the future. And that's why Ballade is such a welcome addition to the Zuid-Afrikahuis. Because it celebrates the modern post-Apartheid South Africa. Um, and you feel it immediately as you enter the room. You entered the Voorhuis all together today, and you felt the presence of such positive pictures, such colorful photos that display positivity, optimism, and diversity. And I'm happy to introduce Michelle Sank, a very talented South African photographer. And we are honored to have your work displayed here in the Zuid-Afrikahuis. And we are grateful that she wants to show us South Africa through her lens. Please welcome Michelle Sank.
Mm. So I just push it on to start. Aha, okay. There we are. So, as you know, I was born and brought up in South Africa and lived there into my early adult years. It's also where my career started, my photography, when I studied at Michaelis School of Fine Art at the University of Cape Town, and I did painting very appallingly. And in the last year of my study, they introduced a photographic course. And I had had no interest in photography whatsoever, but it was like an umbilical cord for me and a connection to the world around me and became my voice. So I ended my university career there in the late 70s. I worked as a photographer at the what is now the Slave Museum in Cape Town, and then I left South Africa during apartheid, and I'll speak to you a bit about that. But what also happened to me, and that in leaving South Africa, the only thing I kept close to my heart was my original negative file of the work that I'd made as a student there. And it's only recently, I had no contact sheets, that I've actually scanned them. And it's been extraordinary to see how the vision as a young person then is now being repeated now, obviously in a more known way, but it's been quite an extraordinary journey for me. So these are some of the very first images I took as a student in South Africa. And this is of, there was an aged sort of Jewish community who frequented the seafront where I lived. And the reason for showing this image really is the way my work is developed now, the way I work very much with close contact portraiture. A lot of my work is street portraiture. It's also about cultural coding, quite subtly, and also the way the portrait and the background start setting up a narrative. So um, real sort of landscape documentary portraiture. And what was interesting here was the sort of traditional look of the brooch, the pearls, the hat, the glasses, and then the modernity of the background. So that kind of slight psychic tension between the two elements. And of course, my awareness of the possibility of light and dark. Um, that's another example of a work that I took of this extraordinary woman who lived below me. But it was also the beginning of my interest in gesture, and something quite spiritual about the work, and a sense of performance. Um, and then once again, the relationships between people that were starting to develop as a very, very young student. Um, and then group work, the dynamics. This was a group of disabled people who worked in the gardens in Cape Town, and it was so amazing when I saw this image. It suddenly brought up all the feelings that I had in working with them all those years ago. Um, so what I'm going to do is just show you how my work has developed over the years, because intrinsic to all the work that I've made since leaving South Africa has been my genetic code from South Africa and my heritage from South Africa in terms of of color, space, light, um, performance, diversity, cultural diversity. And I really struggled when I came to the UK to find that stimulation that 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 was so prominent for me in South Africa. So what happened is that I left during the 70s, and I came to England, but I wasn't allowed to stay in England because I was South African. So I became, in a sense, like a refugee, and I ended up living in Greece. There's no connection at all with Greece, but I ended up there. I became illegal there. I then came to England. So it was really like a fight for survival for many, many years. So there was actually a 25-year gap between my original work as a student and going back to do a master's, which I completed in 2001. And this is work that I did for my master's degree in 2000. When I went to the university, they said, we want you to do something you've never done before. And I was totally isolated from the photographic world. I'd only known black and white as those images, 35 mil. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to work with color, and I'm going to buy a secondhand medium format camera. And what was so interesting, what I was saying about my heritage, is that I started to frequent places that had familiarity for me from South Africa, which was the beachfront, which was these wide spaces, the sky. And when people saw these images, they actually couldn't believe they were made in this very conservative part of England down in Devon. But it was exactly what I was doing as a student. So I was just walking along the promenade, as I had been doing as a young person, and finding people. So this became a big project that I did on young people, where I was interested in performance, in gender, in presentation, in adornment, everything that was familiar for me from being exposed to the multiculturalism and the kind of rituals that come from that in South Africa. So, and I was also interested at this stage in the pre-adultization of children that was happening at the time, that mixture between child and adulthood, and the pressure from the media that was coming on these children to be more sexualized or more adult before their time. But what was happening with the black and white work was now being transferred into my attention to color and the use of light and color, and how that can charge an image with some kind of emotional and psychic tension. Um, so I'm just going to go through this work so you can kind of sense where it all comes from. So I was then given commissions to work with different young people. This was a project about young carers, young children who look after a sick parent or a sick sibling. Um, and it was all about giving them a sense of empowerment. So getting them, at first I started to make work with them actually doing the work, like washing their parents or cleaning the house, and then asking them to dress up in something and to take me to a place. So it was the beginning of also that collaborative process that's really important in my work. Everyone knows I'm taking their photograph, whether it's an organized thing like this or whether it's on the street. it's always a symbiotic relationship that develops, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for much longer, sometimes for years later it continues. But um, and all of this is linking back to my awareness of space, color, landscape, and how people sit in that. Um, this was something I was asked to go to Northern Ireland, to Belfast, and I was really, really excited because it had such reminiscence for me of apartheid South Africa. And they asked me to photograph young people, both Protestants and Catholic, because it was going through that change. And once again, just the attention to color. People have often asked me if clouds are important in my work, and I suddenly thought about that when a student asked me a little while ago, and thought they are. There's a real poeticism and lyricism that comes into the work from that. Um, so these are just some more, my interest in how people present themselves, like these are identical twins, but already at the stage of adolescence, the way their body language is different, how they're presenting themselves to the camera. And I'm just going to read something which came from my first monograph, in which I don't know if you know David Goldblatt, if all of you know David. Okay. So without David, I actually wouldn't be here today, because David picked up on my early work. And when I left South Africa, he said, promise me one thing, that you'll never ever stop taking photographs. And it was the biggest gift someone could give me. And yeah, so when I got back to it, I started to share work. But in that monograph, he's written about the work. And what's written is that the slowness of the picture making process, the artist's careful regard, seems to grant the material space of the portrait a certain kind of privilege. It is as if the subject experiences the space of the portrait as a stage with its accompanying dramatic potential. It is as if, in framing the subject, the photographer sees or constructs a view of the space in a similar way as the space of performance. And I think that sense of performance is so entrenched in in my upbringing from South Africa. Um, this is another project I did on young people, where I was part of a group that explored what it was like to be 16 in the UK today. And I was asked to work in one of the poorest areas in the UK, and to interview. So I did these sort of interviews that accompanied the portrait with questions for them. And this is something that I have now used in other projects in South Africa as well. But you can see this whole thing, my attention to costume and texture and ritual. And then the publishers here, what happened is I had a lot of commissions over the years. I was very fortunate, but I felt I was sort of turning into a bit of a performing monkey. I was producing these portraits that everyone wanted in the UK and America and Europe. And I had this wonderful residency in Wales where I was given a studio for 3 months, and I could have done anything. I could have just sat there and meditated for 3 months. But I thought, I'm going to go back to how I used to work in South Africa, where I would just go into the street and let the work come to me. So for 3 months, I went out every morning and every evening, and out of this very grey area came these extraordinary tableaus, of both landscape, um, and people, and changed my portraiture to not just become about young people, but to go across the age groups as well. And that got published by Schultz. And then I had another year's commission in the Channel Islands. And once again, I had the time really to explore both the landscape and the different cultural elements there. So none of these people I knew. I had to make contact. And once again, I just every day, I was out hunting on the street, finding these amazing people moments. Um, these are quite interesting. I don't know if you know Jersey, but it's very much about finance, and everything's very perfect, and they don't want to show that there are estates, that sort of housing estates. So I was encouraged to go into one of these housing estates. So when it was exhibited, the two were sort of put together. Um, And then just this is really, really important in relation to South Africa. I live in Devon, which I've always found incredibly conservative for me from where I come from. I've always struggled to make work there. But there's a housing estate there that's been there for over 100 years. Um, that feels like me from where I come from in South Africa. It's totally diverse, it's totally individual. People just talk. There's no pretense. And what happened is I thought the way I'm going to survive COVID is I'm just going to go to this housing estate every day. So for 2 years, I walked every day in this wonderful silence. And once again, the magic just came. And there's so much of my South African heritage in this work. And once again, I obviously couldn't go into people's homes. Um, but this wonderful diversity I found there that I felt I really related to, the way things were decorated, once again, textures, adornments, um, just the way the light and color was working. Just fantastical for me, and this very normally when people photograph these housing estates in England, they're very downtrodden and gritty and black and white. And for me, there was just a surge of color and positivity in celebrating these people. Wonderful moments. I went because I always give everyone a photograph when I do it. And because it was COVID, I had to hand the door like this. And I went to Kylie and said, "Here's your photograph." And she appeared in this extraordinary, she was sun. And I said, "Kylie, could you just come into the road?" So, yeah, something, very spirit, as I say, the spirituality in my work that comes through. It was almost like a pieta. Um, so just going through these. And this was published as a book last year. But I really feel at home here because of the cultural diversity. It's interesting. I walked past this garden when no one was there, and I thought that's not an English person who lives there. I just know it's not an English garden. And then I walked past again, and there were a family from Afghanistan. And this was a gift for me. I photographed the father and his two children in the playing fields. And he was a pastor at the local hospital, and his wife had come as a nurse. A lot of nurses are coming to the UK from Africa. And he said, "Do you do commercial work?" And I said, "No, absolutely not." And then I said, "Why?" He said, "Because I'm turning 40, and in our culture, we dress up in our costume." I said, "I'm there. I'm absolutely there in your back garden." So we had a wonderful time. Okay, so that there was a whole body of work that got published last year. And then what happened is since apartheid stopped, I have an elderly mother there. So I was literally flying in and flying out. And normally I would go to Durban where she lives. And then it became quite difficult for me to be there all the time because of the dementia. So I decided I would go to Cape Town. Um, and I would just be there for 10 days and I would go up and see my mother and come back to England. And I got off the plane and went onto the promenade. This is one of my early photographs. Um, and I met him and I said, "I've just come off the plane. I'm really tired, but could I photograph you? It was still COVID there." And he said, "Of course, I've just been crowned Miss Drag South Africa." I said, "You have? That's amazing." And so I worked with him, and this led to a whole nother project where I said, "Jermaine, could I photograph you in your drag stuff?" And he said, "Sure, I'm staying at the hotel at the end of the." And I thought this was never going to happen. And in fact, it did happen. I used this amazing hotel at the end of Beach Road and Sea Point as my studio. So these people would come in, they'd change, I'd move the furniture around, say to the reception, "Don't worry, it'll all." And anyway, that's another project. But it started me going right back to the promenade and working on making images there. And it was only when I started to look at the archival images that I have to see how my vision was absolutely similar. I was interested in the same things. I was going to the same places. It's become more known now. I'm older and I'm wiser photographically. Um, and the pleasure in making this work there and the openness people gave to me to make this work was unbelievable. And I just thought, I'm actually doing a full circle. And I thought, I can't. Well, my partner said to me, you can't come home. You have to stay there. So I stayed for like 6 weeks, then 8 weeks. And then for the last 3 years, I've been going out for 3 months because that's been my maximum. But I've just got my South African citizenship back, which was extraordinary. I got it back last month, even though my name is wrong, and I didn't know that all my life, that my name's spelt with one L, not two L's. But I'm now planning to go back for 5, 6 months. And so I feel I've done this extraordinary circle. So this is the work that I did on the promenade, and it's this magic and the tableaus and the exuberance that I find difficult to find in other places. I have to work really hard to find that. Whereas when I'm in Africa, it's on every corner, whether it's landscape or people, or it's just extraordinary. The relationships I have in meeting and finding out the stories of these people. And they asked me if I would come and their dogs were having their birthday, and if I would come and photograph their birthday party for the dogs, and the dogs are like their children. And it's just, it's these extraordinary stories that I feel so blessed. I feel over and above the photographic work is of the stories. I feel it, in a way, I'm like a visual anthropologist in a sense. But what happened is I got really drawn towards the pool, and that I was born virtually opposite the pool, and this pool's been going, gosh, for I think almost 100 years, and um, I it became a real homage to me to my childhood, and the fact that all my childhood was there. There used to be wonderful concerts at the pool and Punch and Judy shows. There was, going back to that theatrical thing, there was a real sense of theatre. And what I liked about the pool is that I had a natural construct in which to call upon, but to dive in. So I would just, I swim at the pool like I used to as a child. Nothing much has changed there. The fabric of the place is exactly the same. The showers work in the same way or don't work in the same way, and this wonderful lack of sophistication, which is wonderful. So this is from the 70s. That's from, and it was an absolute, when I got the work and scanned, I just thought it's extraordinary. It's the same thing in a way. That that so So basically, I just went in and worked with people, and yeah. So this has been a body of a body of sort of 2 or 3 years work. And Alexandra Dodd, I don't know if you know her at all. She's quite a well-known art writer in South Africa, but she wrote that for many, this area is the sanctum. It's the public place they don't have in private due to cramped living conditions because of the general pressures and continued challenges of life in South Africa. So you get a whole mix of cultures and diversity. This was just magical. This to find these tableaus once again, and just the magic of photography, or life really, the love on her jeans and the red, and she's going through adolescence, she's a little bit insecure. And what happened is this got into the Taylor Wessing Prize in London, and I had to get a model release from her, and it was extraordinary. They live in a township. There was load shedding, and I said to her, I need this model release. I'll pay you to go and get it printed out for me. And she said, no, 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 you're not paying me. And this woman somehow got this thing done and WhatsApp to me. And so last year when I went back, I arranged to meet them and I gave them the photograph. And Zara is now a year on. So that was wonderful. So they have it in their home now. So some of these relationships that I established continue. Um, I saw this vision from afar in the pool, and I thought he's extraordinary. And I went up, and he was deaf. I didn't realize he was deaf, but a woman came through who had actually transitioned, because I then went on to work with him. But and she said, I can translate for you. So the way the love of being in that environment, the joyfulness. Whoops. Um, another couple. I'm really interested in tattoos as well, and the way people mark themselves and the presentation of identity. Um, Something quite retro about this. It could belong in another sort of age, really, mother and daughter. Wonderful. I mean, extraordinary. The hair, just amazing. And then these were boys that had come from a church for the day out. So I'm really interested in how people present themselves, how groups present themselves, the relationship between them. Father and twin sons. I mean, you couldn't write this. It was a gift, this orange and the. Um, and then he actually knew my family, I discovered when I spoke to him. And I saw him this year at the pool, but he's sort of getting dementia now, I think. This was May. He was a boxer at this boxing club. Um, so he was wonderful, Jojo. And then, it's the way the work, I think, is also differing in the way I shoot a little bit, going back to the submerged, where it's not just, there's a different kind of language happening. Um, yeah. And this was amazing. I saw this man and I thought he's extraordinary. And his hands were incredible. So I went up and I said, could I work with you? And he said, yes. I'm like 82, 83. And I said, well, could you stand there and just show me? And then I said, what do you do? He said, I'm a heart surgeon at the Christian Barnard Hospital. And I thought, oh my God, because I was literally like maneuvering him. And anyway, um, and then these guys who are studying there. And her name's, I mean, she was amazing, just so emboldened. I have another image of her with her sister. And then, yeah, the lifeguard that's in um, which kind of is quite metaphorical for me, really. And that's it. So it was other work. Um, Stuff, that first thing of Jermaine led me on to do a whole project about drag queens. And now that I've been back, I've been working with a prison reform group, a Christian group who go into prisons as a restorative process. And how that came about is that I'd photographed this man and his children on the beach 2 years ago. And I said, what do you do? And he said, well, I work for this restorative prison program. And then he told me a story how grew up in a township without a father. He ended up in prison, committed quite bad crime, came through it, and now works for the organization. So I got hold of the guy who runs the organization, who himself was in prison, and the work they are doing is quite extraordinary. They're going into Polsmoor, I don't know if you know, but and all the prisons in South Africa, and his wife is dealing with the female prisons. But the power of the human spirit and the stories of how these people have survived what they went through during apartheid and in those townships and how they've come through is quite remarkable. So that's also a project. And yeah. Anyway, that's that's that.
Are there questions?
Hmm.
If you have 1 second, I need a
Sure.
microphone. There you go.
Thank you. I said, I have a question.
Yeah.
We talked about this uh, when we made the submerged also, of course, but I can imagine that for the audience here, it's interesting to know. I mean, it looks very staged, but how you talk about it, it is as if it is accidental,
Yeah.
that they are steering you instead of the other way around.
Yeah.
How exactly does
Does
that
that
work?
work? So I will see something and I will say, oh my, it's like an electric shock, and I'll just stop the situation. So sometimes, like Jermaine was actually standing there. In others, like the father with the twin sons, I had to move them because there were all things coming out of their heads. So but then I'll work with them, and then they'll think because of the way I'm interacting with them, they will themselves manifest their body language and then yeah, and it doesn't always work, but yeah. And also that relationship for me is really important. So it's not just me as a as a sort of objective photographer standing there. For it's very much about, this. I've always said it's like an act of love for me. Really, it's. I'm so joyous and overwhelmed by, you know. Um, and then sometimes I'd like people would come and ask me to take their photographs. So then I would have to put them in a place. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah.
I was just going to say that a good example for me of your connection. Oh, sorry, your connection. Start singing. It's the same, I think, isn't it? So anyway, is okay, right. Is the one of the twins by the window that we hung by the window?
Oh, yes.
And there was such a beautiful story that Michelle told us when we were hanging the show originally. Not this, we had it in another venue at the back of the gallery first. And she told us about the connection you had with the family.
With the mother,
So I thought that
yeah.
would be a nice story to sort of explain how you do work with people.
They saw me photographing and asked, and she came up to me and she said, "Will you photograph my family?" So I said, "Of course." So there were the twins, which were amazing, and then there was the grandmother and other children. So there are other photographs. And then she came from one of the townships, or the township in Hart Bay. I don't know if you know, up on the hill there. And then she said to me, "Do you have children?" And I said, "No." I said, "This is my child." And she said to me, "You would have made such a wonderful mother, but I can see the passion in your work, such." And I mean, it was such a gift for me. It was such a tender, beautiful interaction, really, really. And that means those kind of things mean even more to me than the photograph, you know. And then the appreciation of them receiving the photographs, is is also wonderful. So I make sure, I can spend hours after a shoot where I've got all these numbers and emails, and sometimes I don't get them right. And yeah,
I just also wanted to say that Michelle's very modest as well. She's not mentioning the numerous international awards that she wins every single year, countless awards. And the one of the girls, for instance, who's traveling around the world at the moment. It's in Australia or somewhere at the moment. That won the Sony Portrait Awards last year, at the end of last year, and that's just one of them. In this exhibition, this small exhibition, about four of them have won international
yeah.
prizes. So I just wanted to mention that because Michelle won't tell you any of that stuff. So that's my job. So anyone else?
Uh, yeah.
From what you said, it looks like a sense of home and place is very important in your work
Very much
and your
so.
practice. And I was just wondering if you've found that in the Netherlands.
In the Netherlands,
Yeah, especially given the Dutch history with South Africa.
I mean, it's been extraordinary to come into this building and to
Yeah.
go into the archive here. I mean, I feel like I'm walking in my heritage, and that I would love to really do some research here.
Mhm.
Yeah, so, but I haven't really, I guess, I do feel a connection because of the Afrikaans and the Dutch and the history, yes. But I don't think I've spent enough time here maybe to
Yeah.
feel really entrenched,
Mm.
and yeah. But there's definitely, I walk in here and it's familiar to me, and the wonderful but also slightly disturbing thing for me now is that when I go to South Africa, I just feel like I'm home. I know who I am.
Mm.
Everyone talks like me. Their gestures, and it's a real problem now because I have a double life and two names, but it's like um, yeah. So it's an interesting journey for me now, and the work that I've made in the UK, I've had to really uh, push myself to find that stimulation in the UK, which I have. And Burnt House Lane just did it all for me because what I found there was the same individual expression and freedom
Yeah.
and lack of conformity that I think I feel, in the energy from South Africa.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah. Let's study together. So,
I was wondering if when you were at Michaelis, were you also interacting with the people?
Yes, on the street.
Oh, really?
Guys,
Oh.
I was. So Lucy knows me. I was like this catatonic vibe person. But what photography gave me, and I was very naive then, but what photography gave me, yes, so all those photographs were street photographs.
Yeah, because I was wondering about if there was any voyeurism. Yeah.
And I'd go
So
to people and
you'd
say,
go
"Can
ask, "Can I take a picture?"
Shy as
Okay,
I was, that's a really
okay.
interesting point. But
It's interesting
somehow
because yeah,
that enthusiasm or the excitement got me to do that. It's really interesting that because I was very, very different. I was extremely shy. Look like I'm
yeah.
but I wasn't shy, but you know,
No.
it's a
But
different
different
energy
times.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was just watching, I was just watching people on the beach and I was sketching all the time, So that's why I asked,
Yeah,
because
no,
it's see
mine
how
was
we were
straight, like
different.
all those
Yeah.
portraits was
Yeah.
straight up talking. And there's a whole lot of other stuff I found in the archive now, but
I see it with the people in the gardens,
yes,
but
that's right.
with them lying in the sun.
Oh,
Those are the ones
the
which I
ones
thought, did you actually interact with those
that I
people?
can't remember, to be honest with you. But some of them where they're sitting, at the pavilion, then
Oh yeah, at the pavilion.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they must have turned around in a similar. I mean, they must have, you know.
Interesting. Thank you, Michelle.
I was going to say, so if anybody is interested in seeing more of Michelle's work, I've worked with Michelle for coming up 30 years now. So we have an extremely large archive of Michelle's work, past and present, at the gallery. So people are always welcome to make an appointment and come and see more fabulous things.
And the books.
So
The one publisher's there. So I've got like 5 books now. Different. And hopefully Ballade is going to be I'm sort of speaking to someone in South Africa, so maybe that will become something. I don't know. We'll see. It must, I know. Well, there's so much work now, and yeah.
Yeah, this is so incredibly beautiful to see. But I'm very curious, do you still do this? Do you still walk the promenade and the beach and still take pictures of people? And what can we expect to see next from you? No pressure.
Streets, pardon you, because an older photographer now said it's very unusual that people are still walking the street. So I've been working in a park in Cape Town that I never went to as a child. Adone Gardens. Do any of you know that? It's got all these amazing plants in, but um, I've been going there. Um, so I did that for 3 months now, but the work's still in its early stages. So I'm really enjoying the tableaus that are coming out of that. So people have birthday parties, weddings. Um, there are people who visit. There's a home for people who've got mental issues. There's a drug rehabilitation center. So everyone comes and it's a small park and they have picnics and it's just, and what's so extraordinary for me. So 2 weeks ago when I was there was a bride to be and all her family were there. And I said, could I photograph you? And I said, could you ask if I can? And the next thing I knew, I turned round and there was just this plate of, I had all my South African food in 2 hours. So it was like some mousses, pies, it was incredible on a plate. So I ate that. And then I went to the next part of the park and there was a Muslim, they were praying. And I said, look, can I take your photograph? And they said, sure. And then I turned around and I had this wonderful selection of Cook Sisters and donuts. I mean, I felt absolutely ill after a few days. So that's what I'm doing. I'm still doing that. And then the prison work has been more, I have to make an appointment to meet these people and I'm getting recordings of their stories. Because they also the organization want to promote the work as well, because what they're doing, and I'm hoping next year when I'm there, I can actually volunteer to be a volunteer in the prisons as well. Because I did do some prison work in England, so I thought if I'm there long enough, because I think what they do, just hearing the stories of these people who have survived against all the odds is unbelievable.
And I have a follow-up question
Yes.
to ask, which you also have touched upon a little bit, but I'm curious if when you work with different generations of people, are some more willing than others to have you photograph them and are more willing to interact with you and tell their story? Do you have like any struggles with that ever?
No,
People seem very open to it.
because I think I behave like I'm quite eccentric, actually, and think when I work, I'm just very excitable.
Yeah.
So no, not really. And I mean, in the park as well, there were these two. I mean, this is what happens to me in South Africa. There were these two 90-year-old women on a bench,
Yeah.
looked similar to that very first photograph. So I said, could I photograph you? The dog was there, the daughter was there. And then I discovered that the one sister went out with my uncle when she was in her 20s. Crazy stuff. Yeah. And then, I've been photographing them, and people are contacting me and saying, will I come and photograph their wedding or no?
Yeah.
But I haven't been there, but hopefully next year. So, I must come to their churches, which would be it's wonderful. So no, no, not with, I mean, obviously when I'm photographing kids, I need to ask the parents.
Yeah.
So that's a negotiation. Yeah.
I highly recommend that you visit Pretoria and take some pictures there too.
Which is, right?
Yes. Yeah, of course.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
So I might, yeah.
I will keep an eye out. Yes, best of luck and thank you.
To do in South Africa now that it's like it's quite difficult for me because there's so much I could do and I don't know how much time I have left, so we'll see. A while, we hope so.
Thank you.
All right.
Right. Michelle, thank you. Thank you all for asking these interesting questions. I want to ask Michelle now to take us on a tour around
Okay.
your work.
Yes.
I was thinking maybe we can start in the conference room in the back and then walk our way here where we have
Yes.
our drinks after.
Lovely.
All right? But first, thank you, Michelle.
Ask questions.
Yes, of course, they can. Thank you, Michelle.